Am I setting a bad example with my art being too nice? Am I feeling my sketchbook wrong? I see this discourse a lot online, saying sketchbooks shouldn't look like mine, that they should be messy or quick and disposable, that if your pages look too finished then you're doing it wrong, and sometimes I do look at my own work and I wonder, am I part of the problem? Before we get into it, hello, my name is Katie, I'm a full-time sketchbook artist and I share my work here online and I teach via Patreon. I love using mixed media and encouraging other people to create. And I've talked about this issue of sketchbooks being wrong before in another video on my channel, so I'll link that in the cards. But I really want to expand on this today because it is an ongoing issue. It's something I see happening all the time and comes up again and again in comments and in videos that I see over on Instagram. So whilst I finish this sketchbook with the final 2 spreads, let's talk about sketchbook culture. So there is this growing conversation online about perfect art, about how polished sketchbooks discourage beginners and artists, about how beautiful pages raise the bar so high that people feel like they shouldn't even start and that they will never try it themselves because it's unattainable. And I totally get it, I do understand that, especially because comparison is really, really loud. When all you see are finished pieces, it's very easy to forget that there was ever a messy middle. And it's very easy to forget that social media is a highlight reel and, there's so much practice and so many years of work and experiments and play behind the scenes that isn't highlighted in one quick reel or one sketchbook flip. And I definitely compare myself too. I look at artists who fill a sketchbook in a month and I think, what am I doing wrong? Why did this one take me well over a year to fill? Or why do I just do one spread and then that's that and I close my sketchbook? Should I be filling multiple spreads in one sitting? Should I be trying to expand on one idea and then try other things immediately after? Should I be more carefree? I'm always striving for looseness, but this sketchbook and this way of creating for me, it just works. It just works for the way that I want to create art. And I do worry that my pages are too pretty. I do feel like maybe they set an expectation that I never meant to set. And I hope it comes across in my videos and my content that I never sit down thinking, this has to be perfect. I just sit down thinking, I want to enjoy this process and I'm open to seeing what happens. And somewhere along the way, I think especially with social media and, this being my job, sometimes enjoyment can get tangled up with performance. And perhaps you feel like this too, maybe with a pressure to share on Instagram. So there's this idea that sketchbooks are supposed to be practice grounds, and mine still is. It's just my way of practice or my look of practice is very different to yours. And there's that idea that they should be messy and unfinished, full of half-finished thoughts and abandoned scribbles. And I think that's really beautiful and it's really, really good. But some of my earlier sketchbooks included those, but that's just not how my brain works now. I very rarely do thumbnail sketches or composition checks or practice pieces. I don't like doing things twice. When I open a page, I want to stay with it. I want to finish the art in one go, mostly because I lack patience and I just feel too excited to get going. And I feel like it gets that creative energy out, and when it's done and I can walk away. Not all of us can have lots and lots of time or mental energy to create, and so creating that one spread and walking away is totally fine. But I definitely see other artists do multiple pages, and that's where my comparison comes in. It's not because it needs to be impressive when I come and sit down, but it's just because that's how I process. I want to work quickly, and it's the only time I don't overthink things. In my real life, or, outside of my sketchbook, I guess, I am an overthinker. I worry a lot, and I've said before that when I paint is really the only time my brain ever switches off. Just jumping in here, because at the moment I'm currently showing you the layer of all the acrylic ink I've put on. This is before I go on with my pencil texture on top. So this is halfway, and then I had so much excess ink, I also filled another spread just doing the base. And I guess that could be, me just closing my sketchbook that's done, but to me it doesn't feel finished. So I want to come back. I always follow that creative intuition of when something's done, and for me I will come back and finish that other spread, and I created that quite quickly just with the leftover on my palette. So I really do work intuitively, and I think that's a really important part of the sketchbook process and the creative process in general. But back to the topic. So yes, I definitely am an overthinker. I do find that when I open my sketchbook and I start to create, my brain does switch off. And it's a really mindful practice for me. So I don't ever question if a colour is correct or, if this is the right mark. I've said before that if I'll do something on the page that isn't quite right, that doesn't matter, I just won't do it again and I'll move on to trying something else. So I don't overthink the layout or the composition. I just truly get lost in the process and I really enjoy the moment. I am present in my sketchbook when I paint, and this is just how many years of practice and creating has evolved for me. So maybe the problem isn't that, some sketchbooks are too nice. Maybe the problem is that we've decided there's only one correct way that they should be. I know the term sketchbook is, it says a sketchbook, but for me, my sketches are kind of more finished and I do work fast. I've been told many, many times I create really quickly, but it has evolved because of all those years of practice of me working under timers and just working out that this is how I prefer to create. This is how I loosen up, is by working quickly. And sometimes I'll spend longer, coming in with more details, and sometimes I won't. But that's just how I create. And we are all different artists. I think that's what it comes down to. Surely we should champion that instead of tearing others down that they are creating in a way we don't think they should. Surely it's coming from ourselves and our sort of place of fear and self-doubt that somebody else is creating work that we aren't yet. Shouldn't we be inclusive of all types of creativity? If we're all creating, then isn't that the point? For some artists, their sketchbooks are going to be filled with written notes and, more like journals. There'll be some unfinished scribbles or half-formed ideas that they can then move on to canvas. Whereas for me, my playground is my sketchbook and only my sketchbook. So I will have finished art in there. For some others, their sketchbooks are going to be like galleries. And for some other artists, they're going to be utterly private and for their eyes only. For some, they are also content, like mine, but none of these are morally superior than others. This is how this final spread is looking. So now I've added on my pencils on top of the acrylic ink layer. Really pleased with this sky. Sky month was our theme on Patreon for February. And yeah, I just loved adding on that extra texture. I think it finished it off really nicely. Really nice movement in that landscape. So very pleased with this one. So just wanted to jump in here because we are about to move on to the very final spread in the sketchbook where I'll be trying something a little bit different. So yeah, this perfect mindset, I feel like that is a very human thought. It's not in the pages that we see online. It's actually the pressure we put on ourselves that I guess we're projecting onto other people's art because of that dreaded comparison trap again. So if you're just starting and you look at pages like mine and feel discouraged, I really want you to know that this is years and years of practice. You don't see the many pages in my previous sketchbooks or the journey that led to throwing down colour and, just having that mindset of seeing what happens. It's something that I constantly encourage to just trust the process because that is where we grow. You won't be able to improve if you don't create anything at all. My whole ethos of sharing and teaching online is to just try things out and encouraging artists to create anyway, to push aside those fears. I know when I used to paint in my sketchbook, it was filled with fear. It was, sometimes feeling that hesitancy, and that's totally natural and normal. So don't feel like, you're doing anything wrong because that is just, being human. And still, I do feel that hesitancy too of wanting something to be good. But when I make those first few marks and dive in, I forget all about it. So it really is a muscle, and that's what art is. It's about strengthening both our creativity physically but also mentally and being open to a piece that is different to what you expected. That was a huge lesson for me in my sketchbook art of, accepting that whatever shows up on the page will never match the idea I want in my head, and that's okay. So I really do think it is a muscle that needs to be strengthened of just being open to what happens. And yes, you might create a piece that you really, really love, and then another day you'll create something that you don't ever want to look at again. But that can all live together, and it doesn't mean the sketchbook is perfect or, something that's really worthy to be shown off. It's just part of the process. And my sketchbook looking quite finished is part of mine. So this sketchbook here, this is a Royal Talens art creation sketchbook. This sketchbook took me well over a year to fill. I did also work across many others, and I choose based on feeling or the medium I'm going to use. It usually does depend on what I'm going to be using that day. It's also the size of the page, so I have bigger sketchbooks and smaller ones, and what I want to paint. I'm not grinding every day, and I definitely don't create every single day. I'm not endlessly productive. I just create when I can, and I don't strive for beautiful art that takes me hours and hours. That is completely against what I kind of want to do. I want to be able to fit my art within my daily life, to come to it with that joy and that play, rather than that sense of, oh, I need to spend hours on this to create something that I'm going to put on Instagram. That is completely not how I create. It just so happens that my art does feel quite finished sometimes, but that's just my process. So creativity really shouldn't be measured in our output. If messy pages light you up, then fill them with your scribbles and just go for it. And if finished spreads make you feel more grounded, then keep making them. If it takes you 3 weeks to finish one page, then that is still creating, and that is wonderful. Or maybe you fill many pages in one go, and that's amazing too, because it all counts under creativity. We all work in different ways, and we should definitely champion that. So the only way to create wrong is to create in a way that feels like punishment. You know, if I had to spend ages trying to fill up my spreads and do multiple a day, that would feel like a chore. I would much rather create in the way that I'm creating, because that encourages me to keep coming back. It makes me want to keep coming back to my sketchbook and fill another page in a way that just feels right for me, and we'll all be different. So this one is the last spread in the sketchbook, and it is a bit different for me because it feels more like my older work, but I also wanted to try something that was out of my comfort zone. So we've got this sort of still life on the left. There's a lot of brown here, lots of wood texture. So I'm using Neocolors and coloured pencils, and also using a little touch of that Ecoline brush pen just to smooth it out. I think that works really nicely. But these are still finished pieces of art, you know, even though they're out my comfort zone. And there are some unfinished spreads in this sketchbook. You can definitely see myself loosening up as I make my way towards the sort of latter quarter or third of this sketchbook, and it reflects my journey, and that's what our sketchbooks are about. I'm going to be sharing a tour of this full sketchbook next week, so it will be all in one, and you'll really be able to see the difference, I think, from the beginning to the end. Making art and finishing a sketchbook, but in your own way and at your own pace, is what it's all about. And as I said before, just create in the way that keeps you coming back. Make the art that excites you. Make the work that you want to play with mixed media and find combinations that you want to try again. Everything should be a journey and just part of your joy. And as I said, we will all have different preferences. You might not love combining loads of different mixed media. You could just want to work with watercolor because that's the one that lights you up. And we also go in phases. So you could be on a watercolor kick, and then a few months later, you'll move to acrylic paint. And so you can experiment and play in your sketchbooks, whether it looks, you know, like the perfect art that you might see online or not. It doesn't matter because you're creating, and that really is what it's all about. And like I said, I know I have done a video about using my sketchbook wrong before, and I'm not making this video for, you know, sympathy or anything. I just really want to encourage looking at art and just being happy for people who are creating, whether it looks finished or not. I really don't think there should be these rules in art, and so I just wanted to really re-emphasize that with this video as I do finish this sketchbook, to do it in your own way. We are all so different, and I just think we should encourage that, whether it does take you more than a year, maybe 5 years to fill a sketchbook, or whether you're doing it within a week. I've definitely seen some artists do that, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But it's also okay for me to be like, you know what, that's not for me. You're a different artist to me, and that's okay too. So just be open to that. And yeah, I really hope you've enjoyed this and found my ramblings helpful. I'm just finishing off this final spread here. So I did prep it with a Posca base layer and also a blue acrylic marker, which I filled myself. And now I'm coming in with the pencils, a little bit of brush pen and some Neocolor just to neaten it all off. So this spread does feel different, but it was nice to end on something a bit different because I do like to push out my comfort zone and try new things. Just labeling this up, so I did finish this off at the end of February last month. And yeah, now it's done. So like I said, I will be sharing a sketchbook tour next week, and I hope you found this video helpful and encouraging. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. I always love chatting with you and hearing what you think. But like I said, if you create different to me, then that's great. I know that my audience understands how I create. It's just, sometimes the internet doesn't have that nuance, and so other people see my artwork and feel very differently. I'm very excited that this sketchbook is finished. I can't wait to continue creating in more of my sketchbooks this year. Thank you so much for your support. A huge thank you to my patrons as well for their financial support in allowing me to create these YouTube videos every week. And I hope you have a creative week ahead. I will see you next Sunday in my new YouTube video. See you later.